Okay. So we will we will start officially. Thank you for being here, Professor Jessica from Cornell University. I know that I asked you for your bio, but like we changed the format very recently, and we're asking presenters to introduce themselves. So please feel welcome to introduce yourself. We will be here for about an hour. So 40 minutes of your lecture and then 20 minutes of QA. I will be helping you with the chat. So participants usually post their question on the chat. And then at the end, I will be here to help you navigate those chats and also fish too. And if there's any technical issue that I don't think there will be, I will be happy to jump in to help you. So thank you so much for being here.
Okay, thank you so much for having me. I have the subtitles on, but um, if they are distracting, let me know. I just got back from my Fulbright in Brazil, and so I'm a fast talker, so I had the subtitles in Portuguese. So if they're distracting to anyone, I can turn off. But hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Dr. Jessica Rush Leeker. I'm a faculty member at Cornell in operations research and information engineering. My research is in engineering education, mostly for pre-K through 12 and community-based research. And today I'm excited to share the story of one of the projects and some of the and I chose this project because some of the members are in this cohort with you all. So it might be great to for them to share if they're here live, or them to just think about reflection from a different perspective if they are not. So I'm going to share the story of our Building Legacy and Engineering project, or as we have on the slides, BLE, and how it connects to a broader framework of E-STEM justice. So some of the members, like I said, might be here. This session is about more than just sharing results. It's about unpacking a way. Oh, hi, Elena. It's about unpacking a way of teaching and practicing engineering that is rooted in community, that is rooted in history, and also equity. So let's see, let's start by just setting expectations. So this is very interactive. I study informal learning spaces, so I am very informal. So as Elena said, please provide chats. You don't have to wait to the end, and I will get to them as I see fit. And we're just going to get started. So I have a virtual icebreaker that I want to share. So in the chat, please share a place or project that shaped your sense of belonging to a community. And we're going to spend about 2 minutes on this. I'll share mine as well, but just think of a place or project that shaped your sense of belonging. And then after 2 minutes, Elena will read some out.
Don't be shy.
Yes, please. You don't even have to read them out. Elena will read them out. So let's just have at least 5. So a place or a project that shaped who you are, or the way you value your community. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, these are great.
Okay.
Okay, I will start with mine, and then Elena will read out some. So I don't remember the exact age I was, but I was pretty young. And my mother doesn't remember this story, by the way, so only my sister and I do. But I think we were complaining about something we didn't get for Christmas, and my mom, we took all those toys and we took them to a homeless shelter, and then we worked for that homeless shelter. And that has been, now that I have my own children, that has been a trademark in my life, and how I see the community as a whole being, how I want my young children to see a community as a whole being and being a part of that. And so I think just giving and donating whatever you have is very important. And so that's why community-based research is important to me. Elena, do you mind reading a couple of
Yes.
the ones you have?
So to be at the scout group at my school when I was a youth, uh, in Iran, participatory urban park designing, Shakespeare Bay,
Mm,
becoming a board member for a local environmental protection nonprofit in my community. That's from Sandra, Young Angel, beach cleanup and protecting nesting birds.
mm,
From Barbara, in Miami, Florida, weight keeper from pollution.
mm,
From Requal, mangrove transplanting. From Brittany, public library. Karen, gathering small groups to make blankets for persons
mm,
experiencing homelessness in California.
mhm,
Mordecai, hi, I'm Keen, live in Eastern Cape province in South Africa. It is very rural on the coast and impoverished. I help with a small farm incubator. It is incredible rewarding teaching people how to grow food and understand importance of biodiversity.
beautiful.
And finally, from Mary, visiting street children and motivating them, giving them food and clothing. Thank you all for
Great.
sharing.
Yeah, thank you so
Great.
much. And Elena, do you want to elaborate on yours a little bit? And then I will ask someone else to share. But do you mind elaborating on yours a little?
No, I mean, I think, well, so I entered to the scout movement when I was 12. They just like put a scout group or club at my school, and I thought that was something that I want to explore. And I usually, because I'm the third of two other sisters. I usually do everything that they did before, but that because that was new, that was an event that I was actually the first person in the family to do. So it actually, I just love it. It's I think it shaped me. It's a lot of what we at the Civic Ecology Lab do. So we basically did a lot of volunteering and like civic practice in combination with like taking care of the environment and stewardship. And in addition to that, we were going to outdoors trip and hiking. But like the scouts have like a ethos that you always have to leave the place better than you found it.
Yes,
So there will
yes.
always that idea of civic, if well, I don't know if there's another word for that, but definitely I think that my time there shaped me, and that's also how I am pursuing PhD related to nature education. So yeah, looking back to those years.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for
You're
that.
welcome.
I don't know if anyone live wants to share. If not, it's okay. We can go on, but I just want to make sure everyone gets space to share if they want. Yeah.
I think if you raise your hand, we are
Yeah.
able to see it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
We can move on. So let's talk about what is the BLE project. So, like I said before, and in case you're just joining, BLE stands for Building a Legacy in Engineering. And it's a community-based engineering project, and it's active across HBCU, which stands for Historically Black College and University, and a PWI, which is a predominantly white institution. And so we support undergraduate students in understanding how to design real-world solutions alongside community members and problems. So our goal for the students in the project is to redefine what engineering education looks like. And I want to stop there for a second. So my PhD is in engineering education, and my advisor kind of the way I was taught is everyone is an engineer. So if you don't have a formal title as an engineer, you come out of the womb. I have two young children, they came out trying to problem solve, critical think, teamwork, and how to communicate. And those are kind of the building fundamentals of being an engineer. And so there's some part of that spectrum that someone tells a student they're not good at math or science, but we all have like the fundamentals to be an engineer. And so our goal for this project was to redefine what engineering looks like. So there are engineers on the project, but there are also communication students, there's agriculture students, there's environmental students. It runs the gamut. And so the project is rooted in justice, and memory and local wisdom. And so I just wanted to start there in the project and kind of frame that. And the core themes of the project, I want to spend a few minutes going through the four core themes of this project because they aren't just buzzwords. They are the blueprint for how we as faculty and students approach justice center engineering. And so the first one is community defined goals. So first, community defined goals means we don't just walk into a community with a predetermined problem to solve. Instead, we listen. We begin by asking what matters to the community. And this also doesn't have to mean going and surveying or and interviewing all. Sometimes there's a lot of knowledge that has already taken place because the surveys and the interviews can also take a lot of time and effort from community members. And so wanting to make sure they are compensated in ways that are appropriate. But this can also mean archival, so pulling up historical records, pulling up past interviews that maybe the news have done, and just kind of doing your due diligence. So kind of, I call it sleuthing, kind of going through all that you can find to create this wonderful picture. And so just asking questions, what matters to them? What keeps them up at night? And you can find this in a variety of ways. What brings the community joy or what brings the community pain? And these are all very important and not just for this project. I just got back from Brazil. And a big part of the project there and working with community projects there for 2 months was this community defined goals was very important. Sometimes we come in or like, oh, they want this, and not really talking to them. And I was in Haiti with Tom Shoes, and this was probably 15, 20 years ago. And so they came in with this whole plan of all these hydroponics, and what they planted wasn't what was native to the community and to Haiti. So just really thinking through that is important. And so in this project, the students, and this is the third year of the project, but at different points, the students had listening sessions, um, did what I talked about of finding the history behind it, the reason behind it, talked to indigenous partners, all of those different things. And this helps shift the power. So communities are a part of the research, and students are a part of the research, and faculty are a part of the research. And it also builds trust, which is essential for ethical engineering. And so I'm going to just put this in the chat and we're going to keep going. But I want, if you have an answer to it or just some one ways that you have done this, and then Elena will kind of read some of the responses. But how often do our students or do you get to co-create project goals with real communities? So I would just love to see your answers. And as I have traveled around the world to see this, it would be great since we have an international group to hear you. But the question is, how often do you or your students get to co-create project goals with your community? The next piece I have here is engineering for liberation. So we often think about engineering as neutral, but it always has served different goals. So the question is, who is being liberated, or whose liberation are we engineering for? So in this project, students weren't just solving problems, but they're also responding to issues that have been there and understanding issues. So we spend a lot of time understanding our own personal history, but also the history of the community to understand that. One one group one year wanted to do a deep dive into like clean water in the neighborhood. So understanding why the water is not clean, where is it sourcing from, all of those different things are important to solve the problem now. It's very important to understand your history. Another group wanted to understand, and this is kind of going on right now, but understanding the food systems that are happening, the lack of food resources. And so in this case, liberation means designing for dignity or with dignity, having more autonomy, and then thinking about the collective well-being of all. So sometimes we have these big dreams and we're like, okay, well, the food bank needs to be open more hours. But also we need to think about who is going to work at that food bank, who is going to support those people. Do they have the resources to have a longer food bank hour? So thinking through that. And so another thing, a question for this stage, I want to ask if you have an answer for this, but like what changes when we ask who is designing, who is this design liberating, or thinking about who is it oppressing? So kind of thinking through that whole piece and just asking yourself the question. Also, sometimes we put more work on other people instead of ourselves. And so just understanding the time it takes for you to do a project is very important. The next one I want to talk about is decolonizing STEM spaces. So in this context, it means challenging the assumptions that we already have as for who is STEM for, who leads it, and what counts as knowledge. And STEM can be for everyone. And it's very important that we design for everyone when when we create these knowledge systems. So we ask students to reflect on who has been excluded from STEM, who has been included, and how that exclusion shows up today. And it's about space. In a context of a classroom, it can be about physical space, transforming our labs to make them more accessible for all our classrooms, and even transforming outdoor spaces to reflect everyone's different values, because it should be designed for everyone. In a context of like a school setting, you can also think about what would it look like to think of a syllabus or a STEM syllabus or lab space work to decolonize that, thinking about everyone in mind. And then finally, relationships and reciprocity. None of this works without relationships. And it's very important that everyone can have a working relationship and know when to fold if it's not going to be working. I think that's a very key piece. So we want to make sure it's a working relationship for everyone and not just some. And relationships build over time, and we give back and we stay accountable. But my grandmother used to say, not everything is meant to last forever. And so knowing when the relationship is not good and we try and we try and we try, and then learning when to protect everyone involved. And so I think building strong relationships is an important way to stay accountable. Having external advisors give advice, so who aren't directly involved, might have the least biased opinion, and getting advice from even either an advisory board or trusted mentors that have done this work that you can really count on. This can also look in a way of just building things outside of the work you're doing. So having celebrations, if you are writing publications, co-authoring papers together, and then just returning to the project after it's complete. And it's very important for me to not always have the answers. And I also teach this way in a very Socratic method of not just always giving the answers, but asking others, what do they think as well? And having different people lead at different times. So we view relationships as both the process and the outcome. And so, thinking about, and you can put some answers in the chat if you want, but how do you or your students experience reciprocity? So not just as a service, but in your program. So how is it reciprocated? How are the relationships created and completed? And it's okay, and we don't write about this enough to have them in if it's not beneficial for everyone. Elena, were there any responses to this slide as I was going through?
Oh, no, no, but I
Okay.
hope people write in the chat. So the two questions are there, and hopefully we'll get some answers.
Perfect. No worries. And I know you all have probably heard this from the, from your the course and from other speakers, but as in every definition, there's a little bit of a spin from each person. And so I just want to level set about what it means when I say E-STEM justice. So this isn't this interdisciplinary acronym. When I was building the slides and going over this morning, I kind of changed, kind of modified it every day to kind of make it. But to me, it's a way of reclaiming STEM education as a site of repair and imagination, seeing what we can do. So breaking down this definition, my definition is E-STEM justice connects environmental, social, and technical knowledge to address real-world challenges with and for our communities. So I want to unpack that because I know it's a lot. Environmental knowledge, so recognizing the land, the climate, the water, the food that's there and how it's sourced, the ecosystems as essential to community well-being. The social knowledge piece includes lived experience from those who live there, the cultural history that's there, and just systemic analysis of things about who has been there, why have they been there, and understanding the history behind that. And then the technical knowledge piece is the engineering and scientific know-how, but it must be informed by the first two. It must be informed by the social knowledge and the environmental knowledge. So this isn't just about solving a problem technically, it's about asking whose problem is it, who defines the solution, and then thinking about what are the benefits. And then thinking about justice, not just as a method, it is justice is the method, not just the outcome. So justice here in this project and how I work isn't just the outcome, but it's part of the methodology that we use. So how we work matters just as much as how we create it. So, we try to work with students that it isn't about fixing communities, but thinking about building long-term partnerships because after this project is gone, who's gonna keep it going? So that's very important. And I was kind of looking back, thinking through some of the questions that they answered. So how do power and history shape this problem? Whose voices are missing? What are the environmental and cultural consequences of the solution? I was kind of just looking back at some of the things, but thinking about like maybe a waste system, thinking about where the waste is going, who has to pick up that waste, all of those things, are creating this feedback loop that you can get. You're not just having a brainstorm with yourself, but you're having a brainstorm with other students, other faculty, to kind of get this feedback loop to advocate a change. And so making sure every part is kind of thought of. And so that's E-STEM justice. So where the environmental, the labor, and all of that kind of matters. And then thinking about the theoretical route. So the work draws on traditions from critical pedagogies, but also the environmental movements. It's about creating a relationship, not just separation, not just acting in silos. And so thinking about moving from learning about, but learning with and alongside communities. And I'm just going to pause for a minute right here, and I want to invite you to share aloud, or if you want to raise a hand, but I want you to take a moment to think about your own work. Do you tend to emphasize one kind of knowledge? So it might be the technical piece, it might be the environmental piece, or the social piece. But if you have a second, think about if in your own work, do you tend to emphasize one kind of knowledge, whether it's technical, environmental, or social, over the others, and try to think why that might be. And we'll wait for a quick minute and then we'll share. Elena will read what's in the chat.
Jessica, there are some answers from previous question in case
Yeah.
you would, yeah.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Thank you for that. I'll pull it in a second.
okay.
Okay, I will share first. So I worked as a engineer for 12 years before I went back to get my PhD. So I, for a while, focused on the technical piece as being front and center, and not the environmental, even though and the social piece, even though they were always a part of it, it was kind of the technical piece, if it could be done, was first. So over the last 8 years, I have kind of made sure that it's all kind of 33% of each, or sometimes it's more environmental or more social, but just kind of thinking through that a little bit better. Elena, were there any other responses? Mhm.
So we have from John Angel, I tend to draw it all together as one. From Kim, environmental, because that is my passion and also my highest education level. From Jennifer, using place-based pedagogy to teach phenomena-based STEM lessons. So using place-based pedagogy for STEM.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're,
And
you're welcome.
what were some of the previous answers? I'll just go back to slide as we.
Um, so we had to question, how often do you co-create project goals with your community, and how do you and your student experience reciprocity? So we have like treating students as individuals break down a lot of barriers. And we have from Sarah, wow, your point about letting relationships ends really strike a nerve. Thinking about relationships with school and school district, they ask us to come in and teach, but we are never met halfway. Teachers
Mm,
don't put in the effort of the pre-lessons. There's no follow-up, but that's not
mm,
the fault of the students. So I am loath to cut off ties, even though I recognize our time is not being respected.
yeah. That's a good one. And is it, I know we have question and answer session later. Can I respond to that? Is that okay, Elena?
Yeah,
Can
of
I?
course,
Okay.
of course.
Um, yeah, that is such a good one. And it's this is hard, but I think boundaries are very important. I've before I knew how to have strict boundaries, I would be up very late at night and I saw how it affected my family for me not just being focused. So, you know, if it has possible is possible and you've had try to have community meetings, make sure everyone's on the same page. There's something that I don't have time for, but called a PALAR, participatory action learning and action research. There is a framework that kind of shows that you are working with this, the framework, if you look it up. Leslie Wood is one of the co-authors. It was created by two professors in South Africa, but the biggest piece of that is kind of you are constantly evaluating why everyone is doing this. And that is something that we do on the project a lot because the needs and the wants shift. So kind of going through that cycle at least once a year. I would advise quarterly or every 6 months, but kind of just going through that so everyone knows why you're still doing the project is very important. I'm gonna move on, but thank you for sharing that. When we talk about learning through legacy, we mean more than just gaining technical knowledge. We're talking about helping students understand their role in shaping the world, whether it's ethically or historically and communally, so all together. Accessible design is very important. So I want to start with that. So thinking about different needs, whether they are visible or unseen, instead of assuming that the need. Sorry, I'm thinking about something. I want to just jump in real quick to universal design. So some things like a ramp, you know, can it's designed for wheelchair, but can be used for various different things. I talk about this in one of my entrepreneurship classes. But if someone has a dolly and bringing boxes up, one of the students brought up if someone's on their cell phone, it's easier to go up a ramp. But think about like things that can be universally designed, and it helps map the project areas. Sorry, I want to go back a slide before. Yes, map the project areas is very important. Um, participatory design. So a lot of you all seem to already be doing this, but participatory design isn't about engaging community members, uh, but just but having them as co-creators. And like was seen here as one of the example, it is messy, it is slow. The timelines are never there, but after it's done or after you hit a milestone, it can be really transformative. So just thinking through that, and as people progress through the years, it's great to kind of sit back and look at the growth that the students have taken. But also the faculty and the community is very important. And kind of working to shift designing for, but designing with is one of the most powerful lessons that the students have learned when we go back and look at all the data. Environmental stewardship. So this is embedded through BLE. It's kind of highlighted depending on which faculty is leading. Right now, we have an environmental engineer leading this year project, but thinking through different projects that students can work for gardens, analyze local water systems, and even learning traditional ecological knowledge from their elders. They began to understand that the land is not just as a resource, but also a relationship. And that changed how students approach the design. So less extractive and more reciprocal. And I see I forgot problem solving, but this is a big one for engineers, but I should have put here problem solving with purpose. So of course, students practice problem solving in this grant, but also redefine what it meant. It wasn't about finding the fastest or cheapest solution. It's about asking better questions, about recognizing the difference between fixing systems and addressing root causes, about staying in the community long enough to understand the real problem instead of, okay, our work is done, we're leaving. I brought up this to our students, but I worked on a project in grad school. I was just a student working on a project. And then I went to see what we did, and it was so overgrown. And they actually kind of mowed it down because we were like, oh, we're going to plant all these natives, and it will take place. And it wasn't for the community. They couldn't upkeep that, and they didn't have time to tend to that. So that's what I mean designing with. And so all across all of these skill areas, the underlining goal was to develop what we call a legacy mindset. We ask students to think long term. What will your project leave behind? Who will it serve in 5, 10, 20 years? And will it be just? That's the kind of learning that changes lives, not just their lives, but the lives of everyone that they're designing for and work with and help influence the future. So those are some things to think through there. Um, I want uh, to look at what BLE taught us as educators. So as the faculty who were here, these lessons are we didn't just plan, we learned them, often the hard way, by working closely with students, but also working together as a faculty team and over multiple years. And so co-designing with the communities, and I know I said that again and again, and it sounds really simple, but it is not. And it's radically different from the way most STEM programs are structured and taught. So we worked to shift students out of this problem-solving mindset into more of a collaborator. And this meant bringing in more local people to have them in our class discussions, honoring lived experiences, respecting pace, um, and just understanding community and understanding when things cannot work. So I just want to reiterate that because I know this is the problem, and every time I bring this up, it's kind of a flood of people like, oh, I've been so afraid to say that this didn't work. And we're trying to gather data of how many, but it seems like it's an ongoing situation. Um, and also just understanding local policies that are there and organizing a community forum to have some information and understanding what is required to listen deeply, checking your own assumptions, recognizing that the community may already have the solutions. They're just lacking the support to make that happen. I think it's important. So the question becomes, how are we training to listen, not to just act, is a very important there. And then kind of creating space for discomfort and growth. This can be painful for both students and educators, but justice work is very uncomfortable. It challenges all norms, it challenges timelines, it challenges expectations that are needed. And that discomfort is not just a sign of failure, is not a sign of failure. It's a sign that learning is happening. And you can even think about that in your own personal relationships. We're all not going to agree on the same thing, but when we work through the issues, the relationship is usually stronger and more healthier. We invite students to reflect on their own positionality and even on their own doubts. And many have never been asked to think about engineering this way. And it can be very messy, but it's also very meaningful. And faculty also have to model that vulnerability. We admitted that we didn't know things, or we brought in experts if we didn't know things, and how to course correct, when it was time. We also shared space to hold grief, around loss, around harm, and then just around different contexts. So as educators, we might ask, are we making space for students to stretch and to sit with what they uncover? Because sometimes that is also a lesson there, just having the space to do that. Because it's like, well, here's a lesson, you learn this, and then wow. But usually when we're teaching all this new knowledge that is reshaping what they have learned previously, it's important to have space for them to sit with what they uncover. And next, prioritizing legacy over deliverables. So this is a huge shift. So often in academic worlds, success is measured by what we produced, right? And so even though we have deadlines and timelines, we are really trying to shift that by asking the most important question is, what are we leaving behind? In some cases, that might be physical structures, but in others, it might be a relationship. It might be a toolkit. It might be a student who stayed in touch with a community partner long after the program ended. So deliverables still matter, but they weren't the only thing that matters, and it wasn't the only end goal. The real metric was impact that lasts us. So we challenge ourselves, we challenge students to think about, who will benefit from this work after we're gone. What will still exist because you were there? So thinking through all of these different things are very important. And so if feel free to share here, but if you're an educator or mentor, take a moment to reflect, which of these lessons feels most alive to you or most challenging, for you right now. So just write it in the chat. So is it the co-designing with the community and not for the community? Is it creating space for discomfort and growth? Is it prioritizing legacy over deliverables? So just kind of put your answers in the chat, and Elena will let me know which one seems to win out there. We'll move on. And then now let's shift, from what BLE did to what you might do. These
Sorry,
lessons, sorry,
Jessica. Yeah. So
yes,
I'm trying to write the question on the chat. So can you
I can go back. Yeah,
repeat
I
that?
can go back. So the question is, uh, if you're an educator or mentor or even a student, take a moment to reflect, which of these three lessons feels most alive to you. So either the co-designing with or for the community, or you can write, the most challenging. So just write alive, and then if it's co-designing or, the most challenging for you right now.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So I want to talk about, move from, the BLE project to what you might do. So these lessons aren't meant to stay locked in a specific program or campus, and hopefully I kind of weaved some of my other experiences into this as well. They're adaptable lessons, so learning environments, classrooms, you can use after school programs, research labs, community spaces. And so I brought this up before. So using a participatory framework like POLAR, and like I mentioned before, that means participatory action learning and action research. So the first invitation is to explore participatory approaches. And so in BLE, we use Pilar to support cycles of action, cycles of reflection, and cycles of adaptation, led not just by the research team, but also by students and involving community members. So unlike traditional research methods, the Pilar assumes all participants are co-learners and co-designers. And it's not a linear process, it's responsive, it's relationship based, are so important. So if you've ever felt tension between planning a project and being responsive to the community, that's exactly the kind of moment where these participatory methods are built for. So something I want to bring up here is when where in your work could you build into more spaces for community voices to shape not just the outcome, but by the process? Um, just think through that. You can write in the chat if you want, but where in your work would you build in more spaces for community voices to shape the process? Elena, before I move on, can you share the challenges or what were some of the answers for the last one? Okay. And then engaging students across disciplines and roles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Mordecai, yeah,
okay.
what were you saying, Elena?
I was muted and I didn't know.
Okay.
So do you
Okay.
want me to
Yeah.
read it or are you reading
Yeah,
them?
yeah, yeah, yeah. You can read it.
Okay. Uh, from Sandra, for creating a space for discomfort and growth, when is
Mm,
the most beneficial time for, oh, that's a question for this.
yeah.
Okay. So throughout the project or at the end? So we have a question there, but answer is prioritizing legacy over deliverables.
Mhm.
Co-designing, I'm fighting in my organization now to offer what the community needs rather than just offering what we are told to give them. It's about getting everyone involved in co-designing. Uh, co-designing with community is most challenging for me because it requires buy-in before everyone has seen or understood the program.
Okay.
Prioritize legacy over deliverables. So often I have experienced projects falling apart when the leader person leaves. So when,
Mhm.
yeah, change of leadership.
Mhm.
Co-design with community, not for community. Create a space for the comfort and growth. And prioritize legacy over deliverables.
Perfect.
And I
I
complete,
saw the question that came up
okay,
about Pilar.
okay.
I will put a link in the chat, but also I just looked it up on my phone. There's a book, it's called Participatory Action Learning and Action Research, Theory, Practice, and Process. It's by Leslie Wood. So if you want to have a chance, you can look that up. And she has a couple webinars on YouTube you can watch as well. Engage students across disciplines and roles. So like I mentioned, all the students in this project weren't all engineers. Some were artists and educators and historians, and that was by design. So community challenges, you're welcome, Mordecai. Community challenges are complex. They don't just neatly fit into the single box or discipline. So when students from different academic and cultural backgrounds come together, they bring in different forms of problem framing, of storytelling, of design. And we are also rotate our leadership roles. So students could learn from each other, not just from us. Like I mentioned, different faculty take over different years. And this also helps burnout from us as faculty. We're not always leading the same thing. So we're also broadening our skills of, leading research this year or leading the curriculum and doing different things like that, or being kind of in charge of um, uh, you know dissemination and conferences and things like that. And this cultivates humility, it cultivates cross-pollination and better design outcomes, and it reflects the real world because solutions are rarely siloed like in one area. So thinking about consider inviting collaborators from different non-STEM fields into your next design project. What might a historian or a dancer bring to an environmental justice campaign? And I actually saw this in real life a couple months ago. I went to go see how a group was teaching, Cornell Tech was teaching computational thinking through dance. And it was the most wonderful first of all, to elementary and middle school things, and in a couple of sessions, they got it, and it was very beautiful to see. And then make identity visible in STEM. So this might be the most urgent piece. So, it's not added later, but it's centered from the beginning. So asking students to reflect on themselves and how their experiences shape their views and their design for the community. So we made space for critical conversations around this, around harm that was caused, but we also centered joy and creativity and resilience and all of those pieces. So the message was you don't have to leave who you were at the door. In fact, you can bring all of these lived experiences, and they're also an asset in the design process. So thinking through where in your STEM curriculum are students invited to reflect on who they are and how that shapes what they can build or study. And, thinking about these is it's important, just thinking about like what is more realistic for you to implement. What would you need to support you into doing that? And you don't have to make all of these changes, but it's just very, very, very important to kind of think through all of these things. And, before we move into like the final pieces of today's session, just thinking through this for yourself, I want to just invite you to do a personal reflection, because ultimately Easton justice and this framework aren't just about frameworks or methods. Is it just about values and what you're leaving behind? So the first question is, what legacies are we building through our STEM teaching? So when students leave the classroom, what do they carry with them beyond equations, beyond coding, beyond tools? What ways of thinking, being, and relating are passed on? And are we preparing students to compete and or collaborate? Thinking through that a little bit more. Are we teaching them to seek efficiency at any cost, and or asking them for whom or with what this might impact? Are we passing down legacy of extraction or repair? Legacy isn't just about these big final projects or products. It's a mindset. It's about how it might be a way of engaging the questions that are asked that shape the longer choices even after the semester ends. And then how do we ensure communities benefit beyond the lifespan of the project? So after the work is done, thinking about what will be there, what will remain. So I just want you to, from the pieces that I just talked about, remember, like, when do we return to listen, to share results, to ask what is needed? Thinking about short-term deliverables, but also long-term. What will define the success is very, very important. Let's see. I'm going to save a couple minutes. I know I've been asking questions throughout, so I won't get to anything. But so far, we've talked about a lot of principles. But what does this exactly look like on the ground? It might be very different by students, but making sure that students feel a part in to co-create is very, very important. So designing for, I just want to highlight a couple of elements really briefly. I know we only have 10 minutes. Time really goes by fast, Elena. So I can't go through all of the examples because I want to save a couple of minutes. This is kind of our end goal. So we have like one more year of our project, but we want to put together like a visualizing book, visualizing legacy, the book project. So kind of capturing students' reflections throughout the historical context. And one of the most powerful elements to emerge from this wasn't about the structure or project. It was like having all of this rich information that we want to have a way to share that is tangible, that's not just in academic journals. And this is kind of what we came up with. So it's a living, breathing archive created by all of the students' reflections in partnership with their faculty members that captured not just what we did, but what became through the process. And I think that's very important of this book project, that is kind of this visual narrative that can be reflective and important here. Some of the students have created beautiful artwork and poetry and design sketches. And so all of this can kind of be a way of honoring all of that stuff. So honoring both of the technical piece and the emotional, both the historical piece and the emergent. It can make the legacy visible, not just measurable. And then, making sure student voices are centered and celebrated. So for many students, this was just the first time their voice and not just their GPA or deliverables was validated in an academic context. And so having them write very honestly about what challenges them, their celebrations, the way they express gratitude and grief and growth was very important. Yes, very quick. So let's talk about place. So we often said that the place was the first teacher here, not just the lab or the textbook, but having the land itself being place. And the place-based learning means to me that we don't just treat the environment as a backdrop. Instead, we center the physical and the cultural piece and the historical piece. And the ecological context of where we're working as foundational to how students will learn. And why this matters, sorry, I don't know why it keeps slipping. This matters because when we engage students in solving real world problems, it's important to start with what's real. And what's real can be very local to where they are. It helps shapes how problems show up and what solutions make sense. And it has all of that history. And so in this context for us and for me, engineering education often trains students to think in abstractions, but also, where they are specifically and how it can be used. Cross-institutional learning, very important piece here. And to me, it's been one of the most beautiful and complex dimensions of this project. But too often we're in our silo of where we teach or where we are, but having this shared experience has been very beneficial for students and faculty, and having that is important. And naming the power dynamics that are there. Usually at PWIs, there's more time to do research work. And less time to do other work. So I think that's very important here. And then this is the last slide, and then we can get to questions, but this is kind of about you. I want to invite you to step into this work personally, not just as a listener, but as a participant. So you kind of heard me talk about this project. You reflected a little bit on your own legacy. Now I want you to think about what this kind of justice-rooted community connected STEM work could look like where you live or where you teach. So think about taking a moment to think about your local context. It could be your neighborhood where you teach, or the community where you grew up in, or even your campus, and ask yourself, what is one pressing challenge your local community faces? And how could STEM education respond? So not just with a technical fix, but in collaboration with the people who are most affected. Think about what existing assets are there, what relationships are there, what stories are there that could anchor this work. This could be from food insecurity to air quality, to safe transportation. It's important to think, oh, that's a great answer, Jennifer. It's great to think about this. And then we have 5 minutes for questions. I know we kind of brought in some during, but Elena, if there's any pressing questions, I know I'll put the link in the chat for Polaris, all that one come through. But I just want to kind of save space to talk about this if you want to share your own personal experiences. And then kind of just reframing your actions. So what you did is just not about kind of working for, but working with, and hopefully you got that from this hour time. And I will be quiet and let Elena tell me the questions.
Thank you so much, Professor Jessica. Thank you for honestly, this interesting presentation about decolonizing STEM and participatory STEM and STEM justice, very relevant. And before, we have one question on the chat, but I will invite anyone, if you have a question, to unmute yourself if you have good audio, or to write a question or a reflection on the chat. So it's the same question that it was before. It's about, for creating a space for discomfort and growth, when is the most beneficial time for this? Throughout the project or at the end?
Throughout the project. So I just shared the book, and I don't I shared the book. I'm trying to pull up. She has this beautiful description. I'm gonna look up as we talk. I've created a beautiful one too, but just give me a second. Um, it's important to do it throughout. If you do it at the end, it's kind of too late. I like to start with it. I like to start with kind of creating the who we are. Why are you doing this? Why are we going to continue doing this? Understanding that it can be painful. I'm gonna pull. Do you mind if I share again real quick, Elena, so I can answer that question? Okay, give me
Yeah.
one second. Um, I found where I wanted to show. Okay. Here's an example. Okay, this is kind of from another presentation, but this is kind of the Polar method. So, you kind of are shaped by the shared vision, but you're working to do relationship building, who we are, why do we want to do this, why do we want each project, what do we bring to each project? You're kind of shaping, like, maximize who's there to enable, what are understanding the constraints, whether it's money or whether it's people resources. You're negotiating roles and responsibilities to make sure all the work gets done. And then you're setting your research goal. And you can kind of do this over and over and over and over again. I advise at least twice a year, more if you can. But just it's kind of important to set the stage so everyone understands why they are doing this. Because you might think it's the same common goal, but it's going to look different. And so I just wanted to share that briefly. Okay.
Thank you. Anyone has a question? Feel free to raise your hands, unmute. I was wondering if you struggle a lot submitting research proposal in engineering with this type of design, where actually you don't have fixed outcomes, and like it's, things are undefined. Yeah.
I feel like I need to knock on something. You to jinx me. I don't think so. I think it's how you explain it. And I would advise anyone to spend time talking to whoever you are submitting to understand. Because I think a lot of people think this work can't be technical, but if it's grounded in methodology that are strong, and your data collection is strong and it's robust, I think that is kind of the end goal of what they're thinking about. Sometimes when it's too loose, like we still have a timeline, we still have deliverables, we still have action items that we definitely meet. But I think to understand and to explain why it's reflective, why there's time for growth. This project's really focused on critical thinking and problem solving, and those are core engineering essentials. And I think explaining that is very important.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I think we have come to an end. I just want to thank you so much for your time and for this amazing presentation. I actually hope, like, honestly, that I can meet you in person. So
Coffee.
yeah, so we'll follow up. I know Fish might too. So thank you so much. This webinar will be uploaded in the course for participants who couldn't join on at this moment. So they will have your email, and if they want, if they have further question, they will be able to reach out. So thank you for joining this STEM community. And now we usually change to Chinese with Fish.
Okay,
So
perfect.
thank you
Thank you
so
so
Thank you
much.
so
much.
much, Jessica.
Thank you.
That
Thank
was
you.
really
Bye-bye.
wonderful.
Okay, thank you. See you soon.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you
you, Elena.
all. Bye, Fitch. Thank you.